December 2017. I had to drive somebody else's car for a minute or two today. I had to move it. And when I turned the car on, talk radio was on. Talk radio, AM radio, the pinnacle of being an educated New World Order citizen. And the first thing that I heard was some accountant or Wall Street guy explaining how Bitcoin was going to be or was already more valuable than gold. Ding, 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 ding. There's the trick. Bitcoin's going to be more valuable than gold. Gold, the one thing, for whatever reason it is, has stood through time immemorial. It's what they make. Everything that's made to do incredible or unbelievably extreme things is made of gold. Gold had everything to do with the Egyptians. For whatever reason, the assholes that are running our world right now, because we're just sitting back and doing nothing for the most part, or everyone else is just ignoring it, but I digress. The assholes that are running the world right now take all their cues and pay serious homage to the Egyptians, the pyramid, so forth and so on. So for whatever reason, gold was incredibly important to the Egyptians, from what they tell us, and from what we can find out. They're trying to get the last little bits of gold away. They've already got your house. You'll never own your property because of property taxes. We'll never own anything. And they want all of it. They want every single last bit of it, and Bitcoin is how they're going to do it.
That have at their inception some sort of national security state component that have become widely adopted, have a carrot and a stick phase. And I think the internet has had a very long carrot phase. But if you go and look at the origins really of the internet in the 90s, it was a lot of framing it as decentralized and all of this, and getting people on it, getting people to trust it and become dependent on it, which now the world is, especially economically. And then you want access to the internet, you have to use our digital ID system or our programmable surveillable money system, et cetera. Like, that is the stick that we all kind of know is going to come at some point, right? Because it's centralized through the ISPs. You want access to the internet, you have to go through an ISP, and how many meaningfully decentralized, freedom-loving ISPs are there? Well, not many. And for places that didn't really have access to an ISP before, they're all being herded onto Starlink, which is basically an extension of the US military, right? And so I think, in addition to that being the case for AI, I think it was true for things like Bitcoin, which was framed as initially decentralized freedom money. Did it have that potential just as the internet had that potential at one point? Sure. But now it's being herded into not being a medium of exchange, which is the only use case, in my opinion, that would allow it to be any sort of freedom money. And it's moving into, strategic reserve asset for Larry Fink and, the oligarchy. And combining it with stable coins and all of that makes it an Orwellian system that's no good. So
I've been warning you for 9 years about this time, and it's finally here. If you were smart, you'd get your money out of the bank, because your money in the bank to you is only ones and zeros, and it can be taken away at any given moment. Turn your 401k and your IRA into gold and have it shipped to your house, so you're actually holding it. We don't know how long it's going to take when they finally pull the last card, but the last card is coming. I've been warning about this for 9 years. You see what I'm saying? Bitcoin is more valuable than gold. That's right. Because for most people, owning gold means they own a piece of paper that some guy says in a bank someplace that you're not allowed to go to. You own gold. It's in your portfolio. Yeah. Smart people have gold in their hand. And when they buy gold, they test gold to make sure gold is gold. Because one of the main people that was screwing people over was the Mint, the U.S. Treasury. You know what I'm saying? Unbelievable. Bitcoin, stay away from it unless you plan on buying a shitload in 1 week and flipping it that same week and getting out and turning it into tangible. Other than that, you're playing right into their design. Bitcoin is exactly the one world currency.
At least no good for freedom. Depends on who you're talking about, I guess. And so I think AI is ultimately going to go in that same direction.
And they're going to try to trick it in like we have no control over it. It's just organic. It's happening on its own. No one knows. It's just crazy. It's going to be worth ridiculous amounts of money no matter what. No one knows where it came from. Come on, man. The exact same people that funded everything that this is all allegedly coming from are the exact same people that have always been the same people. Nothing changes, man. Nothing new under the sun. I warned you years ago that the inventor of Bitcoin was a lie. And then suddenly, the proof actually came out to back me up.
But the main reason I'm here is to clear my name that I have nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with developing. I was just an engineer doing something else.
Okay.
And if you look at the time span, 2001, when it was supposed to be developed, I wasn't there. I was working for the government through a contracting company. That's not me.
Okay.
I never communicated with Bitcoins.
Okay.
Leah wrote all this?
Yeah.
2010 to 2000. I was at home.
Okay.
I wasn't working for anybody.
Okay.
I just believe that somebody put that fictitious name in there.
Mm-hmm.
Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin, or Bitcoin.
Do you think?
I've listened. I've listened to 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗧. I've listened to all the experts. I've listened and listened and listened, and this is what I've come up with. I've spoken to a couple of other YouTube creators that you guys all know very well, and we've come to a consensus, and this is my opinion and my opinion only. What is Bitcoin? Is it the mark of the beast? Is it the DNA of AI? Is it the way we're going? Is it the one world currency? Is it run by a central bank? Bitcoin, nobody knows who created it, and chances are it was created by an AI. Why would an AI, something that doesn't even live in the physical world the way we know of it, that doesn't have any material wants, that doesn't need a car, a house, why would AI create a currency? AI has created currency that is keeping people building AI. Does that make any sense? It's a scam. It's phishing. AI is using this like bait that a fisherman uses to catch a fish. AI created Bitcoin in order to keep people making more platforms for AI to control the physical world. Does that make sense? AI created a currency that people look at and see as the wave of the future, and they want to put all their time and energy into Bitcoin and getting other people to use Bitcoin, which means more computers, more platforms, more access to all the computers. And of course, something we were completely unaware of back then in 2017 was data centers. We currently have 4,017 data centers in the United States, and the number is going up every day. And every data center that they get up and running instantly starts siphoning off all the electricity that Americans need and all the water that humans need, and they don't care. And they're not paying for the water or electricity. Much like everything else, much like Tesla, much like SpaceX, much like everything else, the government is subsidizing it, which means all those taxes they're ripping away from you every single week is paying for our own demise. But we didn't know that back in 2017.
For joining us
like
again.
U.S. intelligence, if you go back to the very beginning, and there's even CIA like deputy directors that have said that, it was all Wall Street people at the beginning. It was Wall Street lawyers, it was Wall Street bankers, and since that point, from the genesis of the CIA, there's been revolving doors between CIA and Wall Street that have continued up until today. And really, you could look at the CIA as a public-private enterprise in some sense. It's a public security agency, but it's more or less functioned throughout its history as Wall Street's secret police. That's why its earliest coups, for example, like its first coup in Guatemala, was done on behalf of United Fruit, a major multinational corporation headquartered in the United States, which interestingly enough was later acquired by Leon Black's father, and then Leslie Wexner's business mentor.
I
Very
know that
weird.
name.
Yeah. And then you also have, like the coup in Iran, over like Anglo-American oil, like them losing their holdings there. The coup in 1973 in Chile, you can argue it was because of efforts to nationalize copper and all these largely Western mining companies losing out, and then they come in and do a coup and what have you. It's really been symbiotic for some time. And I think, as we moved into the information age, the CIA saw an opportunity. Well, let me back up a little bit. The internet from the very beginning was, originally started as ARPANET, a project of the Pentagon. And for anyone that really wants to know about that history, I would highly recommend the book Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. It was essentially created in Vietnam as a counterinsurgency program. That was the goal of it, by the same people that were involved in things like the Phoenix program, which was the first instance of military intelligence, at least U.S. military intelligence, using databases to come up with names of dissidents and then assassinating them. And a lot of them weren't actually dissidents, like suspected dissidents or neighbors of dissidents and all of this stuff. And then from Phoenix program, it goes, all these CIA-backed dictatorships, like, Pinochet in Chile, for example, Operation Condor, use the exact same system. And they've been building these systems with the internet even before the modern internet as we use it now existed. And so a lot of these there were efforts early on to make the companies who would come to dominate the internet. And that has happened. It's just a matter of public record. If you look at the biggest companies in big tech, I've done work about how Facebook was essentially launched as a resurrection of a failed DARPA program called LifeLog by the same person that resurrected the failed DARPA program, Total Information Awareness, one of the most insane surveillance proposals ever in U.S. history, resurrected as Palantir. You can thank Peter Thiel for that, co-founder of PayPal. And a lot of these other companies that have become huge, Google, for example, there's a good article by 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗄𝗎 written on when he published at Insurge Intelligence, called How the CIA Made Google. If you look at a lot of these companies, you will find intelligence agencies at the beginning. Palantir, I mentioned earlier, took In-Q-Tel money, developed very closely with the CIA. It began at PayPal. It's a PayPal spinoff, Palantir is. Oracle, another huge company in Silicon Valley. Larry Ellison, before he started Oracle, was working on Project Oracle at the CIA on databases, and was the infrastructure for Oracle as we know it now. A lot of these, there's been a lot of symbiosis between intelligence agencies and these big companies for a long time, and they couldn't have done it without venture capital. And that's arguably why the CIA launched In-Q-Tel in the late 90s, because they wanted to become big players in Silicon Valley. Because when you decide, who the kingmakers are, well, there's a lot of things actually to be said about that. So what I mentioned earlier about like Total Information Awareness, this is a program that was just deemed so insane in the early 2000s that essentially every mainstream media publication railed against it, and rights group railed against it. But then when they relaunched the same program essentially as a private entity, as a private sector entity, no one complained. And so the CIA for a long time, and other intelligence agencies, have followed this exact playbook, specifically Israeli intelligence. When you move into the private sector, you can get away with a lot more than you can in the public sector sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do. And so there have been efforts to do that, I would argue, for a very long time. And if you look at how these big tech companies have developed, and, for example, revelations from the Snowden leaks, just like how the extent to which these private companies, how much of your data that they're selling or passing to U.S. intelligence for warrantless surveillance. I mean, they've been collaborators of this for a very, very long time. And I think there really hasn't been enough scrutiny of that. And I would really argue that a lot of these companies operate more often than not as intelligence fronts. And it's kind of gotten to the point, too, where in US specifically, the people behind these very big tech, the biggest of the big tech companies, are also the main donors to the two US political parties. You know, you have like Peter Thiel on the Republican side, you have Reid Hoffman on the Democrat side, and Eric Schmidt on the Democrat side. I mean, you know, they fund our politicians and they dominate our you know, private sector infrastructure, especially as we've been forced to be more online, specifically since the COVID era. And the goal is to have things digitalize even further and have it all be on these people's systems and have us become completely dependent on their infrastructure. And these people are in bed with intelligence, and even aside from the intelligence connections, you know, they have a lot of dirty laundry. Why did Jeffrey Epstein have connections with almost every big tech oligarch in the United States? I mean, not enough people have bothered to ask that question. Why were so many of them subpoenaed during the JP Morgan Epstein case in the US Virgin Islands that ended up being settled? I forget how much JP Morgan paid to make it all go away, but a lot of money. I would add about like the Tether play. I think it's really similar, but like in reverse of like what Elon Musk is doing. So Tether started off with money, right? With the stable coin. And now they're going into satellites and brain chips. Musk is doing brain chips and satellites, and he took over a social network, arguably for the user data. And now he's turning or has made it very explicit his intentions to turn Twitter X into a bank that he hopes to be half of the financial system. Why is that happening? It's very odd. And then when you consider all these like PayPal link ups, well, of course, Musk being a co-founder of PayPal, it's all very like, yeah. So like on that note, a lot of the talking points by prominent Bitcoin influencers for some time has been like, this is a solution to irresponsible central bank policy, government fiscal policy, and you know, things like that. And a debt-based monetary system in general, fiat, what have you. And so what are the implications then of this system that's aiming to, you know, yoke the dollar to that and use it to perpetuate the dollar? I think people should seriously be asking themselves, because we're, you know, right now you have like Bitcoin only companies taking lots of money from Tether and being like, we're going to use the dollar to make Bitcoin stronger and stuff. But you can't do that and then also be like, you know, fiat bad, central bank bad, and then just essentially team up with that same system. I mean, it just seems kind of weird, doesn't it? Well, on the case of Saudi Arabia dumping the petrodollar, you could argue that 𝗦𝗵𝗿𝗄 for some time has been moving away from the dollar well before that official announcement. Basically, when he came to power, he was trying to move Saudi Arabia to a post-oil economy. He launched his Vision 2030 plan. And you know, made overtures there that he was going to try and move Saudi Arabia away from oil and sort of make it a leader in the fourth industrial revolution, including in fintech. And we've also seen like other big actors in, you know, Middle Eastern oil specifically, like in, you know, the United Arab Emirates, for example, do kind of essentially the same thing. So I think, you know, it's something that sort of, you know, has been planned for some time. And what's interesting is that MBS, as soon as he came to power and during the Trump administration, was very close to Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was also, we know from emails that have since come out promoting the idea of like stable coins, like an official US dollar stable coin. He actually, I think it was like a Sam Altman blog post that he shared with Steve Mnuchin of the Treasury Department, talking about, you know, the USD coin, which, you know, this is before Circle launched USDC, but interesting. So it's very possible that these discussions were being had like some time ago, that it's not as recent as, you know, it may appear to be based on, you know, headlines that have been coming out recently. Yeah, all I really want to add to that is that it's important to keep in mind that like when the petrodollar system has been, you know, the standard for keeping the dollar the global, you know, or reserve currency, the US has gone to war and like killed millions of people to defend that. One of the likely motivations, obviously there's more than one, but one of the key ones in invading Iraq, I would argue, was the fact that Saddam Hussein, not long before the invasion, had started selling oil in euros instead of dollars and made a lot more money, showing by example to other, you know, other OPEC members that they could make more money selling in different currencies than the dollar. And then, of course, you have the case of Libya, in 2011, where Gaddafi was trying to move to a gold-backed currency called the dinar and was selling that to African countries, a lot of which either use dollars or they use, French financial stuff. And that's why you had the US and France essentially lead that regime change operation with devastating consequences for Libya, which used to be the safest country in Africa, then became the most dangerous, and has been cited as an example of or a reason for why immigration got so out of control in Europe after that point. So there are cases where the U.S. government, or rather U.S. empire, is willing to go to extreme lengths to defend the dollar. So the idea that they would just sit idly by and just let dollarization happen without having some sort of plan in the works, especially knowing that they couldn't keep this going indefinitely and that the world was going to move at some point to a post-oil economy. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty and created insane instability just to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, because it gives a lot of advantages just to the US. And I fully feel that they intend to keep those advantages, even if it means a different system. I understand exactly what you're saying. And it is true for the average Argentinian that in some cases, this can be a lifeline. I get that. But it's important to look at the big picture here. And the big picture is that countries like Argentina and also Lebanon and several countries throughout the world have been targeted by economic warfare for a very long time. Argentina is a very good example. You could argue it began in the 70s and the 80s, and with the economic policy. I mean, when Argentina was a military dictatorship, some of the financial policies they adopted were completely insane. You had a neoliberal in power during the 90s who was very bad for Argentina, in my opinion, Carlos Menem. And then you had their economic collapse in 2001, which, again, you could argue was a direct consequence of a lot of those policies, both of the dictatorship and of Menem's presidency. And then you have the IMF come in and all these other entities. And what they try and do after the 2001 economic collapse is have Argentina engage in things like debt for land swaps, debt for resources swaps. And this has been going on not just in Argentina, but lots of, most of Latin America, arguably, for a very long time. And it's a resource grab.
Yeah.
And, some of what we allude to in this piece and what we hope to allude to in an upcoming reports and, a book, is that a lot of the, people that, I've written about and that Mark's written about and that we've written about together are the engineers of that expressly. And by blowing out Latin American debt in the 80s and 90s, it was a way to basically yoke Latin America to the United States and, or more broadly, a lot of the transnational economic interests that are based in the United States, like Wall Street banks, for example. They engineered a lot of this, and so the situation in Argentina now didn't just come out of nowhere. And obviously, Argentina's central bank has a lot of the blame, but that also didn't happen in a vacuum. Presidents appointed the heads of the central bank that made those policies, and even someone like Milei, who's railed against the Central Bank of Argentina, put former central bank president in a top post in his cabinet. So, these are choices that have been made by politicians. As someone who's been and reported from the ground on Argentina and on Argentinian politics, the corruption there, they just don't even, there's politicians in Argentina that don't even try to hide how corrupt they are. It's just flagrant in some instances in a way I've never experienced anywhere else in the entire world. So I honestly think that what's happening in Argentina, yes, those people have may need stable coins because of the current economic situation, but I think that it was engineered to be that way. They were engineered into that position. And who benefits from that? The same people that I would argue created the solution and created the problem. Well, it's important to understand that there was an explicit effort to limit the discussion about Epstein, to make it just about the sex crime so you don't look at anything else. Mm-hmm. Right.
And he specifically was managing money for the Bronfmans during the insider trading. That was why he came down.
Well, it was
correct?
Suspected because Bear Stearns had the Bronfmans as a tax client, and Epstein left Bear Stearns because of allegedly because he was the SEC was investigating an insider trading scandal involving the Bronfmans' owned company Seagram's. And the SEC was tipped off that Epstein had information about that, and they went to question him at Bear Stearns, and then he was let go. And there's a lot of, he gave different reasons as to why he was let go, and so did the bank. But there's, a significant body of reporting supporting that it was related to that insider trading scandal, which also involved people from Drexel Burnham Lambert and the junk bonds. And you see a lot of Drexel people swimming around Epstein afterwards, like Leon Black, for example, who led their mergers and acquisitions department and were involved in, all sorts of financial criminality. And in that same period of time, he's visiting the White House regularly. And he's going on official like Microsoft business trips with Microsoft's chief technology officer. And then later in 2001 tells the UK's Evening Standard that he made all of his money because of ties to Donald Trump, Leslie Wexner, and Bill Gates. And people act like Bill Gates and Epstein didn't meet until 2011 when he was no longer affiliated with Microsoft. There's been a huge cover up of all of these other connections of Epstein there. I feel like my whole purpose as it relates to Epstein research is to make people aware of that, because, I would argue that the reason Epstein went to prison and all of that stuff happened is because there was a major factional issue within this group, and there were particular interests that wanted Epstein out, and they wanted to demonize him and make him look very bad, but they didn't want enough to come out that it would implicate stuff they were also involved in or had previously been involved in the past.
Now,
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're